It's now time for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with our very own Florence Villeminot.
Hey, Jeannie.
Hi, Flo. Today we are going to focus on the French presidency, and there is a reason that everyone wants to be president here in France. Not only is it the most senior, the most prestigious role in public life, but the French president actually has a lot of power.
Political scientists say that French presidents have more power than the leaders of most modern democracies, whether it's in the UK and Germany, or even arguably in the US. Now, a strong president is a key feature of the Fifth Republic. We always talk about the Fifth Republic.
What is the
Fifth Republic? Well, it was ushered in by Charles de Gaulle with the Constitution of 1958. And it greatly expanded the powers of the president. The idea was to have a very strong leader to avoid the parliamentary paralysis that had really suffered. Well, the country had suffered from it for years before that.
Now, that being said, France is what we call a semi-presidential system. It has features of both a presidential system and a parliamentary system.
France is a hybrid system, and the French president actually gets the best of both worlds. Just like the prime minister in a parliamentary democracy, French presidents have supreme executive authority, and essentially they drive the nation's policy-making agenda. But at the same time, the president is the head of state, directly elected by the people, and the French president can't be voted out of office by the parliament.
So if the president is the boss, if the president drives national policy-making, what does the prime minister do?
Well, a lot of our viewers wanted to know more. Non Guerre, for instance, tweeted me, what are the differences between the president and the prime minister of France? Well, the prime minister is appointed by the president and shares executive power. He or she is essentially in charge of defending the government policy before the parliament and overseeing the nation's day-to-day affairs. Essentially, the prime minister runs the ship and serves the pleasures of the president, who's the real one in charge.
Now, usually French presidents and French prime ministers are from the same political party unless an opposition coalition comes to power in parliament.
In that case, the president has to take a ruling partner from an opposing party. This is known as cohabitation. It's our word du jour. Essentially, it's power sharing, and it can be a little awkward. It's like divorced parents living under the same roof for the sake of the family. Now, cohabitation is very rare. In fact, the last time it happened was in 1997. That's when the conservative president, Jacques Chirac, had to appoint the socialist leader, Lionel Jospin, as his prime minister. Now, they couldn't really stand each other. You can just see their body language. It's pretty frosty. And what's interesting is this cohabitation lasted for 5 years, so it was awkward for a long time.
Now, this cohabitation is the one time when presidents' powers are reduced significantly. In those cases, presidents often focus more on what you might call the 2Ds, diplomacy and defense, which are exclusively their domain.
The French president wears a lot of hats. As commander-in-chief of the French armed forces, the president is the guarantor of France's territorial integrity and national independence. Ultimately, it's the president who decides whether or not to send troops on the ground and whether or not to unleash France's nuclear power. So that's defense, but the president also represents France abroad on the international scene, negotiating and ratifying treaties, naming ambassadors. The French president is a very powerful symbol of the nation abroad, and at times can quite literally physically embody French foreign policy. I've chosen an example for you. This was a seminal moment in Jacques Chirac's presidency. It was in 1996. He was visiting Israel, and he got upset about the very heavy Israeli military presence during a visit of Jerusalem, and so he quite physically embodied France's more Palestinian stance in the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. Let's take a look.
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a encore comme problème? Je commence à en avoir assez. What do you want? Me to go back to my plane and go back to France? Is that what you want? Then let them go, and let them do. No, that's no problem. No, this is not a method. This is a provocation. That is provocation. It's not a provocation. Please, you stop now. Bonjour.
Now, interestingly, there are all sorts of quirky perks that come as well with being French president.
Well, first of all, there are a lot of residences around France that the president can benefit from, but then there are all sorts of weird things, too. The president, for instance, is automatically the co-prince of Andorra and the honorary canon of the St. John Lateran Archbasilica in Rome, and also the Grand Master of the Order of the Legion of Honor. So those are all the extra perks, I guess, that comes. Another perk is that the president is allowed to grant a pardon pardon to a convicted criminal and also benefits from some pretty impressive legal protection. The president is immune from criminal prosecution during his or her 5-year term and cannot be removed from power and except in cases of high treason. In other words, it's really hard to impeach a French president.
With so much power, there have been calls actually for new constitutional reform that would give more power back to the parliament.
Well, currently, France's legislative body is considered one of the weakest in the democratic world. Now, the parliament can force the resignation of the prime minister, but it has little power when it comes to the president. And actually, the president can dissolve the parliament at any time and bypass it altogether to enact laws, for instance, via a popular referendum. There have been calls to usher in a sixth republic via constitutional change to make the system more balanced. Critics say that currently the president of the republic is kind of a temporary absolute monarch from the ancient regime, which is pretty ironic for a country that fought so hard to get rid of its king.
It certainly is. Florence Villeminot, thank you so much for explaining to us the powers of the president of France. Thanks to you for watching France 24. Don't forget, if you have any questions for Flo about the French or France in general, you can always send her a tweet at Flo Villeminot.